Welcome to Civics in a Year, the podcast that makes civic literacy fast, accessible, and surprisingly engaging. In just 10 minutes an episode, we'll tackle one of 250 essential questions about American democracy, how it works, why it matters, and what it means for you. Whether you're a student, a teacher, or just someone who wants to better understand your country and your rights, you're in the right place. Civics in a Year is powered by the Civic Literacy Curriculum from the Center for American Civics and is produced in partnership with the School of Civic and Economic Thought and Leadership at Arizona State University.
Welcome back to Field Trip Friday, Civics in a Year. This is bittersweet because as of now, this is going to be our last field trip through the National Mall with our good friend, Jeremy Goldstein from the Trust for the National Mall. And today we're just talking about the mall as a living civic forum and a First Amendment space. And I know that, Jeremy, you have talked about, First Amendment spaces in a lot of our episodes. So welcome back again. Why is the right to gather on the mall such a powerful thing?
Well, it's always great to be here, and I always love the opportunity to talk about the work that I do on the National Mall. So a great question. The right to gather is foundational to the National Mall in that we often think of those structures, the monuments and memorials, but we have to realize that it's such a large space that allows for multiple free speech demonstrations, advocacy, events going on at the same time. So I think in our last episode, we talked a little bit about, unity and progress. This is the way it's done in our country is that we often gather. I remember being a civics student a long time ago, and I always, there's this big aha moment. It was like, oh, you know what? You can get a petition to try to change something. And you can also gather people to try to change something or to try and commemorate something. Either way, you have the intention of gathering people. Now, I think to start with, I'd love to quickly tell you about what it takes to get a permit on the National Mall.
Yes, because you can't just show up, right? You can't just show up and decide that you're going to do this.
And the thing is you have a right to free expression in any space. But if you are gathering groups of people, there's going to be a permitting process. Not super expensive, but it is really sort of like we want to guarantee that people are safe. We want to guarantee that we preserve the National Mall. That's another aspect of it. So first you have to determine whether you need a permit, and that's like a special event, First Amendment demonstration. Definitely for filming and photography. I know this through personal experience that we had to get a permit to use a tripod to shoot on certain parts of the mall because you're putting a structure down on the mall and you have to make sure that you have permission and ranger oversight from the National Park Service, which is fantastic. They're always supportive of it. I would say that they're the most flexible and reliable group of folks that you'll ever meet because they're like, yeah, we'll be there. We shot our pictures at 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning. So
wow,
it was pretty wild. So, and then, weddings occur, sporting events, military ceremonies, runs and private events as well. But you have to get a permit and then you have to pick an application. There's a couple of National Park Service forms. That's the nuts and bolts. You submit that application in person. You can take it to the Ohio Drive offices just around the corner from the mall, or you can submit it in the online application portal, which is through the login.gov. And, you do these two applications, you time it. There's some funding required. So it's kind of like, I think around the rates are a little bit over $100 for a special event. $90 for a wedding on the mall. I've seen a wedding on the mall at the World War I Memorial, the DC World War I Memorial, which is really cool. And you have to pay for filming and photography. It's a small marginal fee. The other piece that we have to make sure, because it is a historic property, is that large events may be asked for monitoring, cleanup, restoration, and utilities like recovery fees. If there's any damage to the turf, that's a really big thing. They're very sensitive to that. And then you also submit a site layout, equipment lists, and all of those things, and any area specific requirements. So the National Park Police have a station on the mall. They have horse mounted police on the mall. They need to know that something's going on, whether there's crowd capacity questions or pieces like that. And then you really kind of submit. You get the, approvals, if there's any approvals, and if there's any security requirements, and you are ready to go. So that's a big piece, is that any citizen can do this. Any person can really do this, and any organization can do this. And it's beautiful from my perspective. Sorry to get sentimental on that, but
No, a wedding. Like there's so many powerful things that can happen. And I think that sometimes, I definitely, as a lover of history and civics, have moments that I've seen and studied on the mall that just really bring me a lot of hope. So what moments stand out to you as kind of defining civic gatherings?
I always start with Marian Anderson and Martin Luther King as
Yes.
two events. Marian Anderson in the 1930s singing on the steps of the Lincoln, Martin Luther King's March on Washington it just hit me. It's over 60 years ago that happened.
Wow.
And I was talking to someone the other day when I was at an elementary school performance, and they said this performance has been going on for 22 years, and over 60 years ago, the speech occurred, the "I Have a Dream" speech. Organizing a March on Washington without internet or phones or anything like that, the amount of people who showed up on the mall for Martin Luther King's, March on Washington, it's almost baffling to think about how it can be done from our 2026 perspective of like all the electronics. We could text people, set up group texts and all those things, and using platforms to do it. How did you do it with just mail and phone calls, the US mail and phone calls? And that's the ones that really stick out to me. Yesterday I was at the Peace March for the monks who walked from Texas. I do like the sort of almost occasional bumping into really important civic events. One I'll nerd out a little bit on. We participated in the HUD showcase, which was about housing and new technologies in housing. And my team and we worked at the booth. I really had a lot of fun at that because as I got out there and walked around, there were like demonstration housing. There was a whole bunch of like really cool stuff set up where it was almost like a convention center on the mall to talk about housing and housing technology. And like I said, that's a little bit of the granular stuff, but there's always something really that corresponds to a lot of people. Some sort of group is going to have something that applies to them on the mall. But those big civil rights movement moments are what a lot of Americans see that space for.
And to kind of go back to the Marian Anderson thing, it was important that she got to perform there because, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but the story that I know is because it was segregated Washington, D.C., she was not allowed to perform. And Eleanor Roosevelt is actually the one that was like, what about here? And that, listeners, if you have not, I mean, it's easily accessible anywhere on the internet, but it is probably one of those kind of up there with Whitney Houston singing the national anthem that just gives me hope, puts chills on my arms. Like it is such an incredible thing because it is a public space and nobody could say no to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My plug is it's a mall moment on the Gateway. We link to the YouTube video of her singing My Country 'Tis of Thee. She performed in front of a broad crowd of 75,000 people, and it was on NBC radio. And she was, the era's rock star in terms of voice at that time. So, there isn't a confirmation, but it's really interesting to think about 10-year-old Martin Luther King tuning into that broadcast at the time as well. So he invited her to perform as well in 63. So it's really, it's such an interesting connection between those two major events. And watching the video it brings chills to me each time I see it.
And listeners, I will make sure that I link that mall moment to the Gateway so that if you want to see that, it'll be easily accessible for you. Jeremy, how do events like protests or celebrations help shape our collective memory?
I've been thinking a lot about this, especially in 2026 in our sort of post-pandemic world. I taught through the pandemic. I did remote. I did hybrid remote, people in my classroom and talking in the internet. Educators out there, I feel for you. I've been through it. It was a pretty exhausting time. And right now we're having a lot of conversations in education about the importance of gathering and that return to the face-to-face piece. It's hard work to gather.
Yes, it is.
It is. We can Zoom all day, and a lot of my work is remote, but I really value that gathering. So I think like protests, celebrations, commemorations, being intentional about gathering with people peacefully is a really important part of the American experience. And then I also add in there the idea that before any of these things, before phones and any of that stuff, that was a way that you amplified ideas. And it still is a really solid way to amplify ideas, to gather people and have them talking. Now, they're probably going to take a lot of selfies and they're going to post to their channels about it. And that's amplification as well. But the fact that you gathered, anywhere from two to thousands for a conversation, I think it's really significant because the idea that our collective memory is formed by the information we receive, but also that the sort of physical experience of being with other people. And that's really that's something that the mall has to offer. That's something that's reinforced by our democratic ideals.
Again, I love that we're talking about gathering because I recently did a podcast episode with a professor. We were talking about Alexis de Tocqueville. I've never read Democracy in America, but one of the things, it was Dr. Zach Sherman, and I will link that too, but he talked about like civics really happens in those local places, right? When we're together, because when we separate, we're not thinking about our neighbors and we're not having these bigger civic conversations. And I love when doing an interview and it links to something else because I feel like the United States, all these primary source documents, all these places, there's just a big web of how they all connect. And it is gathering is so powerful. And in a post-pandemic world, it's so necessary because you're right. We are doing a Zoom right now and you are completely across the country. And that is really, really great. But that gathering really is a good piece of civics. So what does the mall's ongoing story tell us overall about American democracy?
This is a great question. I also will add a kind of a little bit of a plug. I'm on the advisory council for Made by Us, which is a Gen Z focused civic engagement effort that is nationwide. And when you said gathering, one of the things that they do is they also list opportunities to gather for people of the 18 to 30-year-old group. There's one initiative called the Pizza Party where you just sit and have pizza with other people. There's really no structure. It's kind of like I had this vision of like 50 coffee shops on the National Mall and people sitting down to have a cup of coffee. There's great value in that informality, which I think is really a part of it. But in that, I love that you cited that the local spaces. That's really really what's happening. And ironically, the National Mall is a local space for people in DC.
Yep.
So, your question about that ongoing story of American democracy, I'm going to use a term loosely because I also used to teach a world religions course when I was a TA classroom teacher. There are sacred spaces, and I don't use it in a holy sense, but the mall is one of those sacred spaces where it's like, we are, I work for an organization that preserves and enriches and promotes the National Mall. But the idea is that when I talk about it isn't just a bunch of grass and buildings. It's got this sort of being small in front of the face of history feeling about it. And that kind of like sacredness of being like, oh, people have gathered and said very important things here. And we seek to build commemoration that is in stone. We're going to have a new memorial on the mall this year with the Desert Storm, Desert Shield Memorial, and that's going to be in October. We commemorate points in our history. Now, it's also an opportunity for reflection and to go in there because it's a different experience for everybody. As whenever you go into any kind of large, you feel smaller than history space, you're bringing your own personal perspective in there and your own biases, but you're also bringing in this sort of like, I'm taking a moment. There are silent moments on the National Mall, believe it or not. And those are really important moments. So some of the most moving experiences I've had have been at the Vietnam Memorial and the World War II Memorial when I got to meet 100-year-old veterans, and I'm speechless. And how do you kind of capture that sort of sacred space feeling for people. We've done our best digitally with the gateway, but also when people come on the mall, it's sort of like, yeah, there are curricula, there are things that you can give your students to study and memorize about the mall, and there's all these small facts about the mall. But what really happens is, how do you feel when you walk out there? That's where the physical and the sort of sacred memory piece. Didn't mean to get sentimental on you. That one.
No, I'm thinking about it too, about the places I've been on the mall that have made me reflect and have made me really think. And, I know that former Senator, or not former, he's passed, Senator Bob Dole used to go to the World War II Memorial all the time, right?
Yeah.
And what a powerful thing. And when you talk about a sacred space, it is, I feel like, regardless of the administration, regardless of things, happening in national and state politics, the mall is always the same. The mall always holds that hope and that, sacred piece of what America is and what it, we've talked about this more perfect, right? That this is always something we're striving for. And going through these last 8 episodes with you has been, I love field trips. Field trips were always my favorite part of being a student, sometimes being a teacher, because when you do field trips as a teacher, it tends to be a little exhausting. Yeah. Yes. But this has just been a place to have that hope and have that joy as we go into America 250. Sometimes the world can feel really heavy, and we know that teachers shoulder a lot of that because you have kids who are coming in, they're asking questions. And I've just really appreciated going through the National Mall with you and looking at these pieces. And my hope is, listeners, you've listened to this and you go to the National Mall and you get to see these things. And I know I keep saying it, but I feel like I need to schedule different trips to go so I can do each of these tours and really, I love my walk through the National Mall usually to start my trips, but now I kind of just want to go and be more intentional about the spaces I'm in and thinking and reflecting. Jeremy, I feel like the word thank you is just not good enough. It's so small, but thank you so much for taking us through this, America's front yard and this amazing place that is public and that is sacred and that really does exemplify what America is and can be. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And right back at you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I of course, love talking about this, but I've also loved the opportunity to talk as an educator as well. This is a great conversation with you, Liz. Keep listening, everybody out there. I really enjoy listening to every one of these episodes because, like you said, the connections made between episodes are really fascinating. And I use this term. We have America 250 coming up. We've got the 250th, but I always use the term, the mall and all of this conversation is for the 250th and beyond. We have to continue this national reflection. We have to continue this national commemoration.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Civics in a Year. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with someone who cares about a constitutional republic as much as you do. For more episodes, resources, and updates, follow us on social media or visit us at civics.asu.edu. Make sure to check out the show notes for any relevant links. Special thanks to the United States Marine Band for their performance of the Stars and Stripes Forever. Let's keep building a stronger constitutional republic, one episode at a time.